"Please don't hurt me, my heart is already broken," said the native woman. See what the lonely rancher did next. The bus stopped with a long, tired sigh, and Elena was the only one who stepped down onto the dusty road. The town did not look like much at first glance. There were only a few small shops, a gas station with a faded sign, and houses spread far apart from one another. Beyond the town, open land stretched toward soft hills that touched the sky. The air felt different here, wide, quiet, almost too quiet. Elena adjusted the strap of her small bag on her shoulder. That bag carried everything she had decided to bring with her. A few clothes, a photo of her grandmother, some money she had carefully saved, and a heart that felt heavier than anything inside the bag. She had not told many people she was leaving. There had been no farewell party, no warm hugs, no promises to return soon. She simply packed her things before sunrise and walked away from a life that had become too painful to stay in. She did not run because she was weak. She left because she was tired of feeling invisible. In her old town, people knew her story, or at least they thought they did. They knew about the broken engagement. They knew about the arguments. They knew how she had tried again and again to fix something that could not be repaired. But what they did not know was how deeply those experiences had changed her. They did not see how her laughter had slowly disappeared. They did not notice how she stopped sharing her thoughts. They did not understand how hard it had become for her to trust anyone. Now, standing alone in this new place, she told herself that this was a fresh start. No one here knew her name. No one here knew her past. She could breathe without hearing whispers behind her back. The bus drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The sound faded quickly and silence filled the air. It felt almost too big, like the sky was watching her. For a moment, fear touched her heart. What if she had made a mistake? What if leaving was not brave but foolish? She pushed the thought away. Elena walked toward the center of town. The road was simple, lined with wooden fences and small trees that moved gently in the wind. A few people glanced at her, curious but not unkind. She kept her eyes low, not ready for conversation. She had learned that sometimes people ask questions not because they care, but because they are curious. At the small store near the gas station, she stopped to buy a bottle of water. The woman behind the counter smiled politely and asked if she was new in town. Elena nodded and gave a short answer. She did not share more than necessary. She had promised herself that she would speak less and observe more. After leaving the store, she continued walking. She had found a cheap room for rent on the edge of town. It was small and simple, but it was clean. The owner had not asked many questions, which she appreciated. That evening she placed her bag on the narrow bed and sat down beside it. The room was quiet, too quiet. Without the noise of her old life, her thoughts became louder. Memories tried to return. The sound of raised voices. The feeling of being blamed for things she did not cause. The moment she realized that love cannot survive where respect does not exist, her chest tightened and she closed her eyes. No more, she whispered to herself. She did not want to carry those memories into this new place. She wanted peace. She wanted a chance to rebuild herself, slowly and carefully. The next morning she woke up early. The sunlight came through the small window, painting the room in soft gold. For a brief moment, she felt calm. She decided she would explore the area beyond the town. Walking had always helped her clear her thoughts. She followed a narrow path that led away from the houses and toward open fields. The land seemed endless, stretching in every direction. There were wooden fences marking property lines, and in the distance she could see a large ranch with a red barn and a long driveway. The sight of it made her pause. It looked strong and steady, standing quietly under the wide sky. There was something peaceful about it. Something solid, very different from the unstable ground she had felt in her past. As she walked along the fence line, she tried not to think about anything except the sound of her footsteps. But healing is not simple. It does not happen just because a person changes location. Pain travels with you unless you learn how to face it. She reached a corner of the fence and stopped. The wind grew stronger, pushing against her lightly. She held onto one of the wooden posts to steady herself, but her foot slipped on loose gravel. Before she could catch her balance, she fell to the ground. The fall was not serious, but it shocked her. For a second, she just sat there, feeling embarrassed and frustrated. It felt like a sign of her life lately, trying to move forward, only to stumble again. As she tried to stand, she heard the distant sound of footsteps approaching from the other side of the fence. Her heart jumped. Through the wooden rails, she saw a man walking toward her. He was tall, wearing a worn hat and simple work clothes. His steps were not rushed but steady. He must have seen her fall. Fear rose inside her without warning. It was not because he looked threatening. It was because her heart had learned to be afraid when someone came too close. He reached the gate and opened it slowly. His movements were careful, almost cautious, as if he did not want to scare her. His eyes showed concern, not anger. "Are you all right?" he asked in a calm voice. The question was simple, but Elena felt her throat tighten. In her past, concern had often come with hidden expectations. Kind words sometimes turned into pressure. Promises sometimes turned into disappointment. He took one step closer. That was when the words slipped out of her mouth before she could stop them. "Please don't hurt me, my heart is already broken." The sentence hung in the air between them. The man stopped immediately. He did not move another inch. Surprise crossed his face, but not offense. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to understand what kind of pain could cause someone to say that to a stranger. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The wind moved gently around them, carrying the scent of dry grass and earth. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "You're safe." His voice was steady. There was no mockery in it, no impatience. Elena realized she was trembling slightly. She hated that her fear showed so clearly. She had promised herself she would be stronger in this new place. The man stepped back instead of forward. That simple action surprised her more than anything else. He was giving her space. He was showing her that he respected her fear instead of challenging it. "I saw you fall," he continued. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." His words were plain, honest. No hidden meaning. Slowly she nodded. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice was still unsteady. He pointed toward the ranch in the distance. "That's my land. If you ever need help out here, just call out. But I won't come closer unless you want me to." That sentence stayed with her. He turned slightly, as if preparing to leave, giving her the choice to end the moment. Before walking away, he placed a bottle of water on the fence post near her. "Just in case," he said. Then he stepped back through the gate and closed it gently. Elena remained standing there, watching him walk toward the large barn. He did not look back. For the first time in a long while, she felt something unfamiliar, not fear, not sadness, but a small spark of relief. Someone had responded to her pain without trying to control it. Someone had respected her boundaries without asking questions. She picked up the bottle of water and held it in her hands. It was a small gesture, but it felt meaningful. The open land no longer seemed as frightening as it had an hour ago. The silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt calm. As she slowly walked back toward town, her steps were lighter than before. She did not know the man's name yet. She did not know his story. But she knew one thing for certain. Not everyone who approaches is there to hurt. And maybe, just maybe, this new place was not only a fresh start for her life, but also the beginning of something she had almost stopped believing in. Kindness. The man who had helped Elena that day was known in town as Daniel Harper. Most people described him in simple words: quiet, hardworking, serious. He owned the largest ranch outside the small town, land that had belonged to his family for generations. But even though his property was wide and full of life, his own world had become very small. Daniel woke up every morning before sunrise. The sky would still be dark when he stepped out of his house, breathing in the cold air. He would walk toward the barn, boots pressing firmly against the ground, and begin his daily routine, feeding the horses, checking the fences, making sure everything was in order. He liked routine. It kept his mind busy. Years ago, Daniel had not been this quiet man who avoided long conversations. He used to laugh more. He used to speak with warmth in his voice. Back then, he had someone to share the ranch with. His wife, Clara, had brought light into the old farmhouse. She filled the kitchen with music while cooking. She placed fresh flowers near the windows. She believed the land felt happier when it was cared for with love. But life does not always follow the plans people make. A sudden accident had taken Clara from him. It had happened so quickly that Daniel did not have time to prepare his heart. One day they were planning to repair the barn roof together, and the next day he was standing alone in a hospital hallway, holding onto hope that slowly faded away. After that day, something inside him changed. He continued working. He continued taking care of the ranch, but he stopped talking about his feelings. He stopped attending social events in town. When neighbors invited him for dinner, he would politely refuse. It was not that he disliked people. He simply did not know how to stand in a room full of laughter when his own home had grown silent. The ranch became both his comfort and his escape. He found peace in simple things, the steady breathing of the horses, the sound of wind moving across the fields, the sight of sunsets painting the sky in soft orange and pink. Nature did not ask him questions. It did not expect him to explain his sadness. It simply existed beside him. The townspeople respected him, but they did not know him well. Some believed he preferred isolation. Others thought he was still grieving, even after so many years. A few tried to encourage him to move on, to find companionship again. But Daniel never responded to those suggestions. He believed some things could not be replaced. On the day he saw Elena fall near the fence, he had been repairing a section of wood that had weakened after heavy wind. He noticed her walking along the edge of his property earlier that morning. She did not seem like someone who belonged to the town. There was a certain uncertainty in her steps, like she was searching for something but did not know exactly what. When she slipped and fell, his first instinct was simple concern. He walked toward her without thinking too much. But the moment she spoke those trembling words, "Please don't hurt me. My heart is already broken," he felt something shift inside him. He had not expected that sentence. It was not the kind of thing people usually say to strangers. It was a sentence filled with pain. Honest pain. The kind that does not hide behind pride. For a brief second, Daniel saw his own reflection in her fear. He remembered the nights he had sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. He remembered how heavy silence could feel. He remembered how easily a heart could crack when life changes without warning. That was why he stepped back instead of stepping forward. He understood what it meant to feel vulnerable. He understood that sometimes the kindest thing a person can do is give space. After returning to the barn that day, he found himself thinking about her more than he expected. Who was she? What had caused such fear in her voice? Why did her eyes look like they carried too many memories? Daniel was not a curious man by nature. He believed everyone had the right to keep their past private, but something about her stayed on his mind. That evening, while feeding the horses, he noticed one of them seemed restless. The animal kept glancing toward the direction of town. Daniel followed its gaze and wondered if the woman had safely returned to wherever she was staying. It surprised him how quickly concern had formed. The next morning, Daniel drove his truck into town to pick up supplies. He rarely spent more time there than necessary. He would usually park near the hardware store, collect what he needed, and leave quietly. But this time, as he walked past the small grocery shop, he saw her again. She was standing outside, reading a notice posted on the window. Her hair moved slightly in the wind. She looked thoughtful, almost hesitant. Daniel considered walking past her without speaking. It would have been easier, safer. but he remembered her words and the fear in her voice. Something told him that ignoring her would feel wrong. He stopped a few steps away, careful not to surprise her. "You didn't fall again today, I hope," he said gently. She turned quickly, clearly startled at first, but when she recognized him, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "No," she replied softly. "I'm being more careful." There was a small pause between them. Neither seemed to know what to say next. Daniel noticed she was looking at a job advertisement in the window. The store was hiring part-time help. "They're good people," he said, nodding toward the shop. "Fair pay, honest work." She looked at him with mild surprise. "You know the owner." "Everyone knows everyone here," he answered with a faint smile. That small smile felt rare on his face. He had not realized how long it had been since he offered one so naturally. Elena hesitated before speaking again. "Thank you for yesterday." Daniel shook his head slightly. "You don't owe me thanks. Anyone would have helped." But deep down, he knew not everyone would have stepped back when she asked for space. Not everyone would have understood her fear without questioning it. Over the following days, Daniel noticed her presence in town more often. She began working at the small store. He would see her through the window when he stopped by to buy supplies. She moved carefully, politely greeting customers but never engaging in long conversations. He admired her quiet strength. Starting over in a new place was not easy. He knew that from experience, even though he had never left the ranch. Losing someone can make your own home feel unfamiliar. One afternoon, as Daniel loaded feed into his truck, the store owner approached him. "That new girl works hard," the woman said. "Keeps to herself, though. Seems like she's been through something." Daniel nodded but did not respond with details. It was not his story to tell. Back at the ranch, as the sun began to set, he found himself thinking again about how her voice had trembled that first day. He wondered what kind of disappointment could break someone's trust so deeply. He did not feel the need to fix her problems. He simply hoped she would find peace here. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a slight shift in his routine. His days were still filled with chores and responsibilities, but there was now a quiet awareness in the background. A sense that someone else in this wide landscape carried pain similar to his own. He did not see it as romance. He did not imagine grand changes. What he felt was simpler than that: recognition. Two people, different stories, but similar silence. That night Daniel sat on the wooden steps outside his farmhouse, watching the sky turn dark. The stars slowly appeared, one by one. He remembered how Clara used to sit beside him during evenings like this, pointing out constellations and telling him stories about them. For the first time in a long while, the memory did not bring only sadness. It brought gratitude. He had loved deeply once, and perhaps loving deeply also meant understanding the pain of others. Somewhere in town, Elena was likely sitting in her small rented room, facing her own thoughts. Daniel did not know if their paths would cross again in any meaningful way. He did not expect anything from her, but he made one quiet decision that night. If she ever needed help again, he would be there. Not to control, not to pressure, not to replace what she had lost, only to stand steady like the land he cared for every day. Because sometimes the most powerful kindness is not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is simply being present without demanding anything in return. The days slowly began to find a gentle rhythm. Elena started working at the small store near the gas station. The work was simple but steady. She arranged items on shelves, greeted customers with a polite smile, and learned where everything belonged. The store owner, Mrs. Carter, was kind but not overly curious, which made it easier for Elena to settle in. At first, she kept her conversations short. She answered questions with care and avoided sharing personal details. It was not that she disliked people. She just felt safer when no one knew too much about her. She had learned that when people know your weak spots, they sometimes press on them without realizing the damage. Every morning before work, she would step outside her small rented room and breathe in the fresh air. The town was peaceful at that hour. A few trucks passed by, heading toward nearby farms. The sky often glowed in soft colors as the sun rose over the hills. There was something comforting about the quiet start of the day. Daniel also followed his steady routine at the ranch. Yet now there was a small change in his schedule. Once or twice a week, he found a reason to stop by the store. Sometimes he needed supplies. Sometimes he did not really need anything, but he told himself it was practical to check prices or pick up extra feed orders. When he walked into the store and saw Elena behind the counter, he never rushed toward her. He would nod politely, giving her the same space he had given her the first day by the fence. That quiet respect made her feel less tense around him. Their early conversations were simple. "How's work?" he would ask. "Good," she would reply, "still learning." He would comment about the weather. She would mention how windy the morning had been. Small words, nothing deep, but those small words slowly built a bridge between them. One afternoon, when the store was nearly empty, Daniel came in carrying a list. Elena was organizing a box of canned goods when he approached the counter. "You look less worried today," he said gently. She paused, slightly surprised by his observation. She did not feel ready to explain her emotions, but she appreciated that he noticed without asking too much. "I guess I'm getting used to things," she answered. "That's good," he said. "New places can feel heavy at first." There was understanding in his voice, as if he knew exactly what that heaviness felt like. After paying for his items, he hesitated for a moment. "If you ever want to see the horses," he added quietly, "you're welcome to visit. No pressure. They're calmer than most people." A faint smile touched her lips. "I'll think about it." He nodded and left, not waiting for a firm answer. That evening, as Elena sat in her small room, she thought about his invitation. Horses had always fascinated her when she was younger. There was something strong yet gentle about them. She wondered what it would feel like to stand in a wide field without walls around her. 2 days later, after finishing her shift early, she found herself walking toward the ranch almost without planning to. The path felt familiar now. The wind moved softly across the grass. When she reached the fence, she paused for a moment, remembering the day she had fallen. This time, she stood steady. Daniel noticed her from near the barn. Instead of walking straight toward her, he raised a hand in greeting and waited. She took a deep breath and stepped through the open gate on her own. "You came," he said simply. "I did," she replied, glancing around at the wide land. "It's peaceful here." "It keeps me busy," he answered. He led her toward the barn, explaining small details about the ranch. His voice was calm, steady, never loud. He spoke about the horses as if they were old friends. He knew each one's habits, strengths, and fears. When they reached the stable, a tall brown horse gently moved its head toward Elena. She hesitated at first, unsure how close to stand. "She won't hurt you," Daniel said softly. "Her name is Maple. She's patient." Elena slowly lifted her hand, letting the horse sniff her fingers before touching its smooth neck. The warmth surprised her. The animal's calm breathing eased something inside her chest. "She's beautiful," Elena whispered. Daniel watched quietly. He noticed how her shoulders relaxed, how her eyes softened. It was the first time he had seen her look completely at ease. "They can sense emotions," he explained. "If you're tense, they feel it. If you're calm, they stay calm." Elena thought about that. Maybe that was why she felt safe here. No one was forcing her to speak. No one was asking her to explain herself. She could just stand there, sharing quiet space with a living creature that expected nothing. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they sat on a wooden fence facing the open fields. The sky turned shades of orange and pink. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "silence is easier than talking." She glanced at him. "Yes, but it can also become too heavy," he continued, "like carrying something alone for too long." She understood that sentence more than she wanted to admit. For a moment, she considered sharing part of her story, the broken promises. The nights she had cried quietly so no one would hear, the feeling of being blamed for things beyond her control. But the words stayed inside her throat. Daniel did not push. Instead, he shared a small piece of his own story. He spoke about losing someone important and how the ranch had become his way of surviving the loneliness. He did not go into dramatic detail. He simply described how quiet rooms can echo louder than crowded ones. Elena listened carefully. There was no bitterness in his voice, only honesty. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shrugged gently. "Life changes us. We just have to decide what kind of people we want to become after that." That sentence stayed with her long after she returned to town. Over the next few weeks, visiting the ranch became something she looked forward to. Sometimes she helped brush the horses. Sometimes she simply walked along the fields while Daniel repaired fences or checked equipment. They worked side by side without needing constant conversation. The town began to notice that Daniel seemed slightly lighter. He still kept to himself, but there was a small difference. He spoke a bit more when people greeted him. He no longer rushed out of the store as quickly as before. Elena also felt a change inside herself. The tight knot of fear that once sat in her chest all day had loosened. She still had painful memories, but they did not control her every thought. One afternoon, as they stood watching a group of horses run freely across the field, she finally spoke more openly. "I used to believe that if I tried hard enough I could fix everything," she said quietly. "But sometimes, trying harder only makes you more tired." Daniel nodded. "You can't fix something that doesn't want to be fixed." She looked at him, surprised by how clearly he understood. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden promises, just two people slowly allowing themselves to be seen. Trust did not grow like a loud fire. It grew like a small candle, steady and careful. As the days passed, Elena found herself smiling more easily. She even laughed one evening when Maple nudged Daniel's hat off his head. The sound of her laughter felt new, almost unfamiliar to her own ears. Daniel noticed it too. It reminded him that even after loss, life still holds moments of light. Their friendship remained gentle and respectful. Neither rushed ahead. Neither demanded more than the other could give. For the first time in years, Daniel felt that the ranch was not only a place of work and memory. It was slowly becoming a place of shared presence. And for the first time in a long time, Elena realized that maybe her heart, though broken once, was not beyond healing. Sometimes healing does not arrive with loud announcements. Sometimes it arrives quietly in simple conversations, steady kindness and sunsets shared in comfortable silence. The air felt different that afternoon. The sky, which had been clear in the morning, slowly filled with thick gray clouds. A strange stillness settled over the town, the kind that makes people look up and wonder what is coming next. Elena noticed it while standing behind the counter at the store. The wind outside began to push dust across the road and the trees swayed harder than usual. Mrs. Carter looked out the window and sighed. "Storm's coming," she said. "A strong one." Elena nodded. Storms had always made her uneasy. Not because of the rain itself, but because of what storms reminded her of. In her past, heavy weather often matched heavy moments. Raised voices, harsh words, nights when she felt small and unheard. Even now, the sound of strong wind made her chest tighten without warning. By early evening, the sky turned almost dark. Thunder rolled across the hills, deep and loud. The store closed earlier than usual. People hurried home. Doors shut. Windows were secured. Elena walked quickly toward her rented room, pulling her jacket close. The wind felt sharp against her skin. By the time she reached her door, the first drops of rain began to fall, slow at first, then harder within minutes. Inside her small room, she sat on the edge of the bed and listened. The rain hit the roof loudly. Thunder cracked again, closer this time. The lights flickered once, then twice, and then everything went dark. The power had gone out. For a moment, she sat frozen. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise before it. Only the sound of rain and distant thunder filled the room. Her breathing became uneven. Her thoughts began to race. She tried to remind herself that she was safe. This was just weather, just nature. But memories do not always listen to logic. The darkness pressed around her. The walls felt smaller than usual. The storm outside seemed too loud, too powerful. She stood up and paced across the room, trying to calm herself. Without thinking too much, she reached for her jacket and stepped outside again. The rain soaked her hair almost instantly. The wind pushed against her as if trying to hold her back, but something inside her moved her forward. She got into her car and started the engine. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. She did not fully understand why she was driving, only that sitting alone in that dark room felt unbearable. The road toward the ranch was muddy and slick. Rain poured down heavily now, making it difficult to see clearly. Thunder flashed bright light across the sky for brief seconds, yet she continued driving. When she reached the long driveway leading to Daniel's ranch, she hesitated for a second. What was she doing? Showing up in the middle of a storm without warning. But before she could change her mind, another loud crack of thunder shook the air. She drove forward. Daniel had been inside his farmhouse, lighting candles after the power went out. Storms did not bother him much. He had faced many of them over the years. He knew how to secure the barn, how to calm the horses, how to wait patiently until the sky cleared. As he stood near the window, he noticed faint headlights cutting through the rain outside. He frowned slightly. No one usually came this way during bad weather. He stepped onto the porch, shielding his eyes from the rain, and saw her car slowly coming up the driveway. Without hesitation, he walked down toward it. Elena stepped out of the car, rain soaking her clothes instantly. She looked smaller in the storm, as if the wind might carry her away. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain fell heavily around them. "You shouldn't be driving in this," Daniel said gently, raising his voice slightly over the storm. She shook her head, trying to steady her breathing. "I know, I didn't want to be alone." The honesty in her voice struck him immediately. He nodded once. "Come inside." There was no question in his tone, no judgment, just calm direction. Inside the farmhouse, the soft glow of candlelight filled the room. The warm light felt comforting compared to the dark storm outside. Daniel handed her a dry towel without saying much. She stood near the doorway at first, uncertain. The house felt lived in but simple. Wooden furniture, a worn sofa, old photographs on the walls. "You're safe here," he said quietly. Those words again. Safe. She moved toward the sofa and sat down, holding the towel tightly in her hands. For a few minutes, they simply listened to the storm together. The rain hit the windows hard, but inside the house it felt distant. Her breathing slowly became steady. Daniel placed a kettle on the gas stove to heat water. "Tea helps," he said. She managed a small nod. The storm outside seemed endless. Thunder rolled again, but this time she did not flinch as strongly. Something about not being alone changed everything. After a long silence, her voice finally broke through. "I don't like storms," she admitted softly. He sat across from her, giving her space but staying present. "You don't have to explain." She looked down at her hands. "They remind me of things I'd rather forget." He waited. He did not interrupt. The words began to come slowly at first, then more freely. She spoke about nights filled with arguments, about feeling blamed for problems she could not fix, about trying again and again to make someone see her worth. She spoke about how small she had felt, how her confidence slowly disappeared. She did not use dramatic words. She simply told the truth. Daniel listened carefully. His expression remained steady, but his eyes showed understanding. He did not offer quick advice. He did not criticize the people from her past. He simply allowed her to speak without fear of being judged. When she finished, tears quietly rolled down her face. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to come here and unload everything," she said softly. "You didn't unload anything," he replied calmly. "You shared it." There was a difference, and she felt it. Outside, the storm began to lose some of its strength. The thunder grew less frequent, the rain softened. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair. "No one who has already been hurt deserves more pain," he said slowly, "and no one should make you feel small." She looked at him, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "You deserve peace," he added. The words were simple, but they settled deeply in her heart. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel ashamed of her past. She did not feel weak for being afraid. She felt understood. They sat quietly again, but the silence felt different now. It was not heavy, it was calm. After some time, the power returned. The lights flickered back on, bright and steady. The storm had almost completely passed. Elena stood slowly. "I should go back," she said. Daniel walked her to the door. The rain had reduced to a gentle drizzle. The air felt fresh, washed clean by the storm. "You don't have to face everything alone," he said before she stepped outside. She nodded, holding his gaze for a moment longer than usual. "Thank you." This time her voice did not tremble. As she drove back toward town, the clouds began to separate, revealing small patches of clear sky. She felt lighter, as if something heavy had finally been spoken aloud and released. Back at the ranch, Daniel remained on the porch for a while, watching the last drops of rain fall from the roof. He felt a quiet shift inside himself, too. Listening to her had reminded him of his own journey through loss and healing. He had not tried to fix her problems. He had not tried to win her trust forcefully. He had simply stayed. And sometimes staying is the most powerful thing a person can do. That night marked a change between them. Not a dramatic one, not something loud or rushed, but something steady. Two people who once carried their pain alone had chosen for the first time to share the weight, even if just a little. The morning after the storm felt different. The air was fresh, washed clean by the heavy rain. Sunlight spread gently across the hills, touching the wet grass and making it shine. Everything looked renewed, as if the land itself had taken a deep breath during the night. Elena woke up earlier than usual. For a moment, she forgot about the storm. Then she remembered driving through the rain, standing in Daniel's warm kitchen, speaking words she had kept locked inside for years. Instead of feeling embarrassed, she felt calm. She had not been judged. She had not been interrupted. She had not been blamed. That realization alone felt powerful. At the ranch, Daniel stepped outside and looked at the sky. The fences had held strong. The barn was secure. The horses were calm. Storms, no matter how loud, eventually passed. He had learned that lesson many times in life. But this storm had brought more than just rain. He thought about Elena's trembling voice, about the way she had finally allowed herself to speak openly. He respected her courage. It takes strength to leave a painful past. It takes even more strength to talk about it. Daniel had spent years living quietly, protecting himself from further loss. He had told himself that he did not need anyone. The ranch was enough. The routine was enough. Yet lately, something had shifted, not in a loud or dramatic way, but gently. Like a door opening slowly after being closed for too long. Later that afternoon, Elena finished her shift at the store and walked toward the ranch again. This time, the sky was bright and clear. She did not feel fear as she approached the fence. Instead, she felt a sense of belonging she had not expected to find so soon. Daniel was repairing a section of wood near the barn when he saw her. He set his tools aside and gave a small wave. "You made it through the storm," he said. "So did you," she replied with a faint smile. They stood facing each other for a moment, comfortable in the quiet space between them. "I wanted to say thank you again," she said, "for listening." He shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank someone for caring." The word caring stayed in her thoughts. They walked side by side toward the open field where the horses grazed peacefully. The land looked brighter under the sunlight, the grass greener after the rain. Everything seemed alive with possibility. As they walked, Daniel spoke carefully. "I've been thinking," he began. She glanced at him, curious but not anxious. "There's a small cottage on the far side of the ranch," he continued. "It hasn't been used in years. It needs cleaning, maybe some repairs, but it's solid." She waited, unsure where he was going with this. "If you ever need a place that feels quieter than town," he added slowly, "you're welcome to stay there. No expectations, no pressure, just a safe space." She stopped walking. The offer surprised her. Not because it felt wrong, but because it felt kind in a way she was not used to. "You'd let me stay on your land?" she asked softly. "It would still be your choice," he said. "I'm not asking for anything in return." That was the part that mattered most. He was not offering control. He was not offering conditions. He was offering freedom. Elena looked across the wide field. The wind moved gently through the grass. She imagined waking up in a place surrounded by open sky instead of narrow walls. She imagined mornings filled with fresh air instead of heavy thoughts. "I don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. "You wouldn't be," Daniel replied firmly. "Sometimes people just need a place to breathe." She felt emotion rise in her chest, but this time it was not fear. It was gratitude. Over the next week, Daniel began cleaning the old cottage. He repaired loose boards, fixed a broken window, and cleared out dust that had gathered over time. He worked steadily, not mentioning it again unless she brought it up. Elena visited often, helping where she could. She swept floors, washed old curtains, and opened windows to let sunlight in. With each small task, the cottage slowly came back to life. It was not a large house. It had a small kitchen, a bedroom with a simple wooden bed, and a front porch that faced the open fields. But it felt warm. One evening, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset, she finally made her decision. "I'd like to stay," she said. Daniel nodded as if he had expected that answer but did not want to assume. "You'll always have your own space," he reminded her. "No one will push you." She looked at him carefully. "Why are you doing this?" He took a moment before answering. "Because someone once gave me kindness when I needed it most, and I never forgot how much it mattered." She did not ask for more explanation. She understood. Moving into the cottage did not change everything overnight. Healing is not a switch that turns on instantly. There were still moments when memories returned. There were still days when doubt tried to whisper in her ear. But now, she was not alone in facing them. Mornings became something she looked forward to. She would step onto the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun rise over the hills. Sometimes Daniel would be in the distance, working near the barn. Sometimes he would wave. Sometimes they would share breakfast together in comfortable silence. Their connection did not rush into romance. It did not need dramatic words or big promises. It grew through shared tasks, quiet conversations, and steady respect. Daniel found himself smiling more often. He repaired fences with renewed energy. The ranch no longer felt like a place filled only with memories of loss. It felt alive again. Elena began to rediscover parts of herself she thought were gone. She laughed more freely. She spoke with more confidence at the store. The fear that once lived constantly in her chest began to fade. One afternoon, while brushing Maple's coat, she realized something important. Her heart was not as broken as she once believed. It had been wounded, yes. It had been tested, but it was still capable of trust. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch of the cottage watching another peaceful sunset, she turned to Daniel. "When I first met you," she said, "I thought everyone who came close would hurt me." He listened quietly. "But you didn't," she continued. "You stayed patient." He gave a small smile. "You stayed brave." They sat together, not touching, not rushing anything, just sharing the moment. The sky slowly changed colors from orange to soft purple. The world around them felt calm, steady, full of quiet hope. Daniel had not saved her. He had not fixed her past. He had not tried to replace her pain with empty promises. What he had done was simpler. He offered space. He offered respect. He offered presence. And sometimes that is enough. As darkness gently covered the fields, Elena felt something she had not felt in a long time: peace. Not because her past had disappeared, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because she had found a place where her broken heart was not judged. It was understood. And in that understanding, two lonely souls discovered that healing does not always arrive with loud changes. Sometimes it begins with one simple act of kindness and grows quietly, day by day, under an open sky.